Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 108. I'm here in the vomitorium on a January evening down in the bunker with my good friend and the world's greatest co-host.
Oh, well, thank you.
Dr. Jeffrey T. Winkle. How are you this evening, Jeff?
I'm feeling good. It feels like we've been away from this for a while.
It has been a while.
It hasn't been that long, but it feels like a while.
The fans are clamoring.
Yes, they are. Exactly. They're getting restless.
That's correct.
Right.
Give us some new content already.
Right. I think it's part of it is, we have the holidays. They're now behind us. We're
Yes.
we're kind of forward into the new year.
Correct.
Right. It's a time for a fresh start and leaving the past behind.
That's right. And we're going to get this episode out at least in the first week. That's the plan.
Yes.
Did you make any New Year's resolutions?
I did not this year.
Not even one?
Well, I mean, I started getting back into exercising,
Yes.
did some weightlifting, and so I guess
You're looking fit over there.
Thank you. So I guess my resolution is to continue with that.
Right.
How about you?
Well, I resolved that I was not going to complain about the weather.
Really?
Like I did so much on the podcast last year. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I do remember.
Smarch this and smarch that.
You're not going to do that.
Well, I don't know. I probably will end up doing it, but I'm intending not to complain about the weather so much.
Now, you strike me as someone who would be kind of bah humbug about the whole resolution kind of thing.
I am pretty bah humbuggy about the resolutions.
Yeah, but okay.
I made one resolution.
Yeah.
It's like 1920 by 860. Just kidding. No, I'm going to try to write 2023 on every check.
Oh, really?
That's my resolution.
Are you still writing checks?
Yes. Don't people write checks?
Hardly any anymore.
Really?
Everything's digital these days.
Oh, I guess so.
Right?
Do you have your Apple Wallet and your Google Pay?
I got my Venmo and my Brogo. And
You're so cutting edge.
Oh man, I'm on top of it, man.
Right. What's this podcast about?
Oh, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, just generally. I'm trying to gently, so gently move us back to the topic.
I see. Well, we talk about the classics on this.
That's
podcast.
correct.
Right. So
It's the podcast for classical gourmands,
That's
right?
right, yeah.
People who like to take it in and keep it down.
exactly.
All right.
That's right. So what are we talking about tonight?
So tonight's topic is Book 8. We are back to Vergil's Aeneid, Book 8. We're going to talk about the story of Evander and the monster Cacus.
Yes, right. Now I was excited as I was reviewing material for this. 'Cause kind of back in my mind, it's been a while since I've read through the Aeneid.
Right.
But I've always associated kind of these like books 8, 9, and 10 as kind of the doldrums of the Aeneid.
You had a similar attitude toward the intermediary books of the Odyssey, if you remember. Once we get past 11,
Yeah.
the Nequia,
Right.
and then you get into the intermediaries, 12, 13s, and 14s.
Yeah.
You thought those were kind of sleepy too.
I do, and it maybe for Vergil kind of imitating Homer to agree. I mean, because those latter books in the Iliad too are kind of those. It's like one battle, and how many times
Right.
can one guy's head get chopped off?
Right.
Right.
There has to be some variety.
Yes, but this is just a long way of coming back around to saying that I was really kind of pleasantly invigorated by
Right.
kind of the first half of Book 8, which we're going to try to cover tonight. This is really great stuff.
Yes, one of the reasons that I like it is that I used to teach from this little Latin companion book. Some people might know it. It's a 38 Latin stories.
Yeah.
It's got a white cover.
Yes.
Not a great font. I don't know if it's in Hackett's repertoire, but Groton and May, I think Anne Groton and James May.
From St. Olaf.
That's right.
Yep.
And this is one of the stories covered in there.
Oh yeah.
Is Hercules and the monster, the Cacus.
Yeah.
And so I taught on that, so many times that portion is familiar and a very good story.
It is a great story, and we'll be looking at some Latin as always, and
Right.
and Lombardo's translation of this event is fantastic.
Yeah, and I would like to just tip off something that's going to come up in the middle, and that is somewhere in the middle, Lombardo's translation refers to Hercules as, quote, the mightiest avenger.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I missed that.
Yes, the mightiest avenger, which if, you've been following Marvel at all.
The MCU?
Correct.
Yes.
This is one of their catchphrases. And tie in, if you saw the utterly horrible most recent Thor movie, as some unnamed person did.
I was warned away from it.
I think maybe I warned you away
Maybe
from
it was you, right? I heard it was wretched.
One of the closing scenes, they introduce Hercules.
Oh, okay.
He's going to be in the the Marvel universe in the future.
Do you remember who plays Hercules? Anybody you recognize?
It's not a well-known name. Not well-known to me, at least. Impressive individual.
Yeah.
Might turn out physically impressive.
Shirtless?
As you would expect.
Does he show up shirtless?
Of course. So it might turn out to be okay.
Okay.
But I thought, Stan, did you know the mightiest avenger? That's a catchphrase. Or maybe the MCU got it from Stan. Who knows?
Who knows? Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
So we got no shout out tonight, do we?
That's always a letdown.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah.
However, the last episode on the Lucan census, that thing went through the roof.
It did.
People really liked that.
Yeah. So, listener, if you're jumping to this one,
right,
dial back, check that out. Yeah.
Yes, it was real popular. So this I bring it up because somebody's listening. They just don't want to be acknowledged on air.
Right. Exactly. So send us those notes.
Correct.
Keep them coming.
Now, Jeff, I think you have the opening quote, which is going to set up this entire book. We're probably going to only cover half of Book 8. Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
We're not going to get to the shield.
No, I think the shield will be probably next episode.
Yes.
Right. So the story within the story of the kind of the fight between Hercules and Cacus is the set piece for the first half of Book 8, right? Mm-hmm. And so this opening quote comes from an article entitled "Hercules, Cacus, and Evander's Myth-Making in Aeneid 8" by one David Antonio Secchi, from a edition of Harvard Studies in Classical Philology from about 10 years ago.
2013.
Yes.
So, Jeff, that, if I may, that's painfully recent.
Yes.
Right?
It is.
Classic, in classicist times, it's like yesterday.
It is, right.
This article hasn't had any time to breathe, really.
The ink is still drying on
right.
it. Right.
What does Professor Secchi have to say?
He says, the tale of the struggle between Hercules and Cacus towers over the ideological panorama of Aeneid 8. I looked out my bedroom window this morning and I thought, what a nice ideological panorama.
I think that is some, how do we want to put it, florid prose.
It is.
To begin this particular article.
It's a little much.
It is. But that's what you have to do. If we're going to interrupt, the article as we go through it, I have one coming up too.
Excellent. All right. Secchi continues, but such a complex weave of ideological and mythological motives is not without drawbacks.
Let me pause you there.
Yes.
Complex weave. That's what I'm planning to cover up my bald pate.
Oh man, I need one myself.
No, you got more than I do.
Oh,
but,
yeah, okay, yeah.
The complex weave, I just thought, ideological and mythological motives is not without drawbacks. Every weave has some drawbacks.
Some drawbacks, right. On a close inspection, Evander's tale turns out to contain a number of inconsistencies that go well beyond the complexity and magnitude of Vergil's ideological, encomiastic, and mythological effort.
See, now, if we can just pause again, I don't know Mr. Secchi. It was published by the Harvard Studies in Classical Philology, so we can assume the bar was pretty high.
Yes.
But when I wrote articles in graduate school, my goal was to include as many polysyllables as possible.
Was that right?
Of course. If you use short, approachable words, you don't sound like you're saying anything significant.
No.
You've got to use large jawbreakers.
Exactly. If you're clear, we don't have anything to do with it.
No, it's got to be sesquipedalian.
That's right.
But I digress.
Continues, these inconsistencies are usually seen as temporary props inserted by Vergil, or as due to lack of revision, or as anachronistic references.
So he gives three different reasons, right?
Yes.
For these things in Book 8 that he doesn't particularly like.
Yes.
Or he thinks they don't fit, these inconsistencies.
Yes.
So temporary props, lack of revision, or anachronistic reference.
Yes.
Okay.
Therefore, Evander's reliability as a narrator tends to remain unchallenged. Evander does indeed do a good job in depicting Cacus as a true scourge of the Seven Hills, to the point that Cacus almost emerges as the real focus of Hercules' 10th labor. Unlike Geryon, who is merely described as a defeated and despoiled enemy, Cacus is a monster with truly Typhoean attributes and Cyclopean savagery.
Wow.
Right.
Guy can turn a phrase.
Yeah. So just to fill in the gaps.
Yes, we need to provide a little bit of a backfill here.
So the story of Cacus, as it's usually told, is Hercules is on his way back to Greece after dealing with the triple-bodied Geryon.
Yes, this is the 10th labor.
Yes.
Right? So the triple-bodied Geryon lives in Spain.
Yeah.
And he is the son, if I'm not mistaken, of Medusa.
Yes, that's right.
When her head was severed, the blood came out and gave birth to Geryon, this guy with three torsos. Mm-hmm. And He shows up in very early Greek vases, and it's a very fascinating story. He's got the four-headed dog, too, right?
Right, who I believe is a relative of Cerberus.
That's correct.
Yep.
And so Hercules goes over there and steals his cattle.
Yes.
And then on the way back, he travels over the Pyrenees, just to keep the geography in mind, over the Pyrenees. So he's heading northeast. He goes across the Alps. He goes down into Italy.
Right.
And between the 10th and the 11th labor, he has this one with Cacus.
Right. Now, just in terms of geography, it's always puzzled me. Like, where's he? He's going back to Greece. He's got to prove this labor to Eurystheus, right? Back in Tiryns. Where's he going exactly? Is he going to put him on a boat?
No, he's going to take them all across land, I think.
But why is he coming down the boot of Italy? I mean, going back to Greece, you're going to have to get on a boat somewhere.
It is a par ergon.
Yeah.
He, as he's traveling along, I have this on good authority, he heard that down in Italy there was another monster, and he thought, well, I might as well just go dispatch that one.
I see. Just take a little detour.
Right.
Okay. All right. So
I keep using this word par ergon,
yes.
right? Hercules' labors are the dodecata erga, the 12 labors, right? Is it 12?
12.
Yeah, right. And this is a side job.
Yes.
Right? He has several of these along the way. He slew a whole bunch of Ligurians, if I'm not mistaken, with bow and arrow on his way down into Italy. And like you say, why stop off in Italy?
Yeah.
There's another monster to dispatch.
Right, exactly. And this is one of these tales that the Romans seized upon.
They loved it.
And wove it into their own kind of mythological backstory.
Yeah, and the reason seems to be that you have to connect with Hercules somehow.
Yeah.
Every locale has to have a Hercules story.
It's true.
It's just so interesting. It's kind of like the way that every town in the United States has a street named Lafayette.
Yeah, right.
Or because of the famous revolutionary French general.
Exactly. Yeah.
You just got to have that connection.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right, Hercules, and he was also prodigious in his offspring. So many royal families could trace their lineage back to Hercules' bloodline.
That was very delicately put, Dr. Winkle.
Thank you.
Prodigious in his offspring.
Right. Well,
nice.
when we actually cover Hercules as a topic, it's going to be harder to be delicate.
You may not be so delicate.
May not, right.
Right. Well, he was a philanderer.
Right. So, I think, broadly speaking, what Seki's setting up here is that there are some issues with the Cacus episode as Vergil presents it. And so Seki's kind of scratching his head about it because he's, okay, is this something that Vergil would have gone back, had he lived longer, and kind of cleaned this up? Because there are some odd things about it that don't seem to really connect with larger themes and such. So Book 8 has a number of unfinished lines. We'll actually look at one of them today. So it raises those questions, which we've alluded to, but I think we'll dive into once we get to the end of the series. Is to what degree is the Aeneid unfinished?
Correct.
Yep.
Right. We need to tell the audience who Evander is too, because we keep talking about him.
Yeah.
And some of them may not really know.
So who is Evander?
Right. That's what I was asking you.
Oh, asking me. Well, he's the local chief of the Arcadians.
Correct. He's a Greek by heritage. He's a descendant of Hercules.
Yes.
And as we'll see in just a moment, the book opens, the book develops. Aeneas makes a journey to Evander to ask for help, to form an alliance, in the process of which he gets this long, digressive backstory on Evander's famous ancestor, Hercules.
Hercules, right. And just as with Homer, anytime there's a long digression, a long story within a story, it's going to speak to larger themes. Right. It's not just taking a break from the bigger narrative. It's saying, okay, what is Aeneas supposed to hear in this story?
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right, so let's dive into the text.
Right.
So we're getting into, we're gearing up for war.
Correct.
Right? So it's eventually gonna break out between Aeneas and his allies and Turnus and the Rutulians and everybody on his side, and we're gonna get into that full Iliadic bloodletting.
Yes.
But we're not quite there yet. We've got some alliances to sort out, and that's really what's happening in the first part of Book 8.
Correct. So there were some skirmishes in Book 7 when the gates of war were open.
Right.
When that famous albino stag was accidentally killed by Aeneas' son Ascanius, because Juno arranged it all. She must have war. So there were skirmishes and so forth, but the full conflict, like you were saying, hasn't quite begun yet.
Right. We're still waiting on that. So we see Aeneas early in this book, a lot like we see him in his very first appearance in the epic. He's he's tossing and turning. He's worrying. He doesn't know kind of where his fate is leading him. He's kind of on that knife edge of indecision.
Right.
And so he has this vision where the river god Tiberinus shows up to him.
Yes.
Yep.
The father of the Tiber.
Yeah.
Sacred to the Romans.
Right, and so he's the one, and this is a pattern throughout this book. When Aeneas is kind of at the height of his angst, some kind of divine sign that comes in to kind of reassure him that you're on the right path, or kind of push him to the next destination.
And do you like that? I know before you were saying you found, this was many episodes ago, but you found the constant reference to Aeneas as pious Aeneas. I'm pious Aeneas. A little dull. Are you still feeling that way?
A little bit. This book too is replete with lots of rituals done properly, right? And the wine is poured at this point, and this is when you slaughter the cattle, and all that. That gets a little, to me, it gets a little old. But
well, let's examine that for a minute.
Sure.
Do you have rituals in your life?
Of course, I have rituals,
Okay.
but I don't write epic poetry about them. Right? I'm not. These aren't on display for.
But isn't that just, if I may, a failure of imagination, not a lack of desire to represent rituals in what you had written? I don't mean a failure of imagination, but if you were inclined to write an epic poem, wouldn't you put your rituals in there?
I would, but I'd mix it up a little bit.
Okay.
Right? So I think that I get. I know I'm not alone in this. I get tired of Aeneas as kind of this blank slate, right? He's not an Odysseus, right?
Yeah.
We don't see him. His first line of defense or attack is, I'm going to use my wits, right? He's usually like, what am I supposed to do here? And then some, kind of mini Scooby-Doo ending has to come in and say, and kind of push him to the next square on the chessboard.
Right.
So I find that a little, I think it's just, I find Aeneas, a bit dull.
Okay.
I've loved kind of going back to the Aeneid. I've found all kinds of wonderful things here, but Aeneas is not one of them.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Fair enough.
You want to throw back on that?
I don't know. I'm trying to think charitably and fairly, not about you, but about the Romans. I'm trying to think how it would have appealed to the Romans. I'm wondering, is there some different toleration? I've heard it said different people have different capacities or capacities with or patience for repetition and ritual.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's true for sure. We've talked about this in terms of humor, right? If something is funny once, you and I find it funny 1,000 times.
Right.
The kind of, stupid shenanigans that we were up to in Greece. It's just funny.
Exactly.
Other people don't think so.
No.
So maybe it's similar with this kind of ritual. Maybe every time the Romans heard in Vergil's poem that Aeneas was acting piously and performing the rites and duties, maybe that resonated with them, and they thought, "Oh, that's so interesting."
Undoubtedly, right? So I just started this book on Constantine,
Right?
And in the first chapter, I'm blanking who the author is, but kind of he wants to set up what was the tenor of Roman religion, going back,
Right?
Kind of setting the stage
prior to the Constantinian
conversion,
right,
whatever that was, and he's talking about how the calendar of rituals,
right.
What who you're worshiping, what you're doing on particular days, that really gets nailed down with Augustus.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that,
and it's endlessly complex.
Complex. Right.
It's like trying to fill out your taxes.
Exactly right. And you have to keep track. Okay, who's been deified this week?
Right.
And it's fascinating. And they talk about how even every platoon or every centurii in the army had the standard contains like the genius of the platoon.
Yeah, genius in the sense of the tutelary deity.
Yes, right.
Not genius in the sense of really smart person.
Right, and so there were days that the army you would garland your standard, and you'd pour out the wine and such, and all of that really starts with Augustus. So if you read Vergil's hyper attention to proper ritual against that background, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. When we get on to the prophecy of the white sow, right, I was immediately put in mind of the Arapacus, right?
Oh, yeah.
With the swine that are on that very famous monument that was set up by, and now reconstructed, by Augustus.
Yeah.
So the Romans were a deeply ritualistic people. They seemed to love it. They seemed to really enjoy it. And I just wonder, as post-Enlightenment individuals, if we can ever have the same level of appreciation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Right? It can strike us as kind of excessive or silly.
While we meanwhile overlook the large amount of ritual in our own lives.
Right.
I was just hoping you'd just give us one. What's one Winkelian ritual that you never get tired of?
I don't know if being tired of it comes into play, but when I'm in the gym,
right,
and I'm lifting weights in between sets, I walk from the machine, I go get a drink, and I do a lap, and I come back.
Wow.
Every single time.
Every single time.
And I watch everybody else in the gym will do the reps if they're on the machine.
Right.
And then they'll just sit there.
Or maybe stare at themselves in the mirror.
Stare at the mirror, or maybe pick up their phone.
Yeah.
To wait it out. And so I always have to kind of move. And I find something very comforting in that ritual.
You walk and you drink and you walk back.
And I walk back.
Yeah.
Between every...
See, I love that, Winkle. I could hear that story 1,000 times.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that fascinating?
I would never get bored of that. So let me get this. You walk.
All right. Okay. Can we move on, please?
No, I'm not making fun of you.
No, right.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Hey, how about we read some Latin?
All right. I'd love to.
Okay.
So this is starting with what, line 36?
Yes, and this is Tiberinus in the vision speaking to Aeneas.
And Tiberinus, again, that's the adjectival form of the word for the river Tiber.
Right.
So this is the Father Tiberinus, the god of the river, right?
Yes.
Okay, so he says to Aeneas, O satagenta deum Troian ex hostibus urbem, qui rebahis nobisai ternaque pergama servas, expectata solo laudren tar visque latinis, hic tibi certa demus certi nabsista penates, neobel liter redre menistum or omnis et irdre, concas se redeum.
Oh, and it's
stopped.
It's an unfinished line.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So there are a couple dozen of these scattered through the 12 books of the Aeneid.
I was reading. There's 58.
58?
There's 58.
Oh, I was way too low.
Unfinished lines. Yes.
Huh.
Right. So this is one of these things that are a part of the Aeneid that are clearly unfinished.
So that's about not quite 5 per book.
Yeah.
If my arithmetic is correct.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so we can talk more about this, especially at the end of this series. But,
Right.
But yeah, this is one of these very clear places where Aeneid, Vergil, if he had lived, he would have gone back and polished this up.
Yeah. No, I want to make a prediction.
Yeah.
I'm going to predict that somewhere in some dusty volume, there's some recherche article about how each one of these lines was intended to be unfinished.
Oh, really?
And it has to do with Virgil's deep displeasure with the Augustan regime.
Oh, really? Yeah, you're probably right.
Which I'm trying to make fun of even as I describe the possibility, because I think, it's probably just he didn't finish them.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I get that impulse to want to give Virgil the benefit of the doubt. Right?
I appreciate that.
And to say, okay, well, this must be part of his genius.
Yeah,
right?
but that's kind of ridiculous.
No, yeah, exactly.
You want to give us Lombardo's translation there of those lines?
Yep, and as been our practice, I'll translate the lines you just read and a little bit more.
Excellent.
So, the god of the Tiber says this: "Child of the gods, you bring us our Troy back from the enemy, and you preserve Pergamum forever. You have been awaited on Laurentine soil in Latin fields. Here your home is sure. Do not draw back, and sure are your gods. Do not be frightened by threats of war. All the swollen wrath of the gods has ebbed away. To assure you this is no empty dream, I offer a sign. Lying under oaks you will find a sow near a hidden stream, with a litter of 30, a white mother lying on the ground, and a white young nursing. Here shall be your city, and surcease from sorrow."
Okay. Very nice. So now we have a prophecy. So similar to the way in which Aeneas and his men, many books ago, received the prophecy that when they reached their final resting place, they would know they were there by eating their tables.
Yes.
And it turns out
that was
flatizza.
Flatizza. It was the first pizza.
Right.
Right.
And didn't Odysseus get a sign that when people were using an oar as a winnowing fan,
oh, yes,
he would know?
Right, exactly. Where they asked him he had an oar on his shoulder, and he had to go until they asked him, "What are you doing with a winnowing fan on your shoulder?"
Correct.
Go a place where they didn't know what an oar was.
Right, too far from the water.
Right. Yeah.
So similarly now, Aeneas gets this sign of a white sow with a litter of 30 piglets.
Yeah.
What do you think about this one?
I'm realizing now as I'm looking at this that in the show prep, I didn't really think about why a pig? Why a pig nursing? I guess it's kind of an Abrahamic type of prophecy. You're going to be the father of many children.
Yeah, I don't know. Given the prohibition against the eating of pork in the Old Testament, that may not have been.
I was speaking very broadly.
Okay,
right.
All
So,
right.
so a sow with many young is kind of
it's a symbol, a sign of great prosperity.
Okay.
Because the average litter of hogs, I don't know, is maybe 8 to 12, something like that. That's a rough estimate. 30, that's a prodigy of nature, right?
Yeah.
That's incredible. And that the sow is white. It's albino.
Right.
Right. And it's because it's rare.
Yeah.
yeah.
And as you were saying, I mean, the pig was a common animal in ritual sacrifice.
Very common.
So I'm sure it certainly has echoes of that as well.
Right. That's a lot of bacon, let me just say.
A lot of bacon. It reminded me of a similar kind of story when Cadmus is looking for his sister, and he goes
Europa,
and he goes to Delphi, and Apollo basically tells him, "You're not going to find your sister, but you got a different path of destiny. You leave here," and says, "and find a cow with strange markings. Follow it until it rests, and then that's where you're going to find your city."
Yeah, Thebes, as it turned out.
Yes, and so it seems a very similar kind of vibe here. You look for something kind of gentle and common in nature to signal your path.
I think the commonality is the important part. So something we've all experienced, I mean, I say all, but in the time, the agricultural setting, the rural setting, they knew what a sow and piglets was. So something that's common in that sense, but it's extraordinary in the specific instance. Right. That it's white and it has a litter of 30 piglets.
Right.
No one had ever seen anything like that. So it stands out.
It does. And I think there's kind of the element too is that things that are so common in nature, but if you know how to look at them, right? Even something like for the Romans will look at birds flying, right? And so just something as common that you see every day, birds flying in the sky. But if you know how to look at them, they can give you a glimpse into the future. Here. Now here, of course, we have a god telling Aeneas exactly what it is. But it is something that, if you look at nature in a particular kind of way, you can see the divine.
That's brilliant. Yeah. That's exactly right. So you have to know how to peel back appearances and see the deeper meaning hidden in everyday events. Right.
Yeah. And one more thing that struck me here, too, is that this is also, with the Tiber speaking, we have not just, Venus on Aeneas' side, the imported Greek gods. We have the indigenous gods of Italy itself are saying, yes, we're glad you're here.
We've been waiting for you.
Yes.
So that's going to be a theme that emerges throughout the rest of the epic, and we've seen signs of it already in Book 7, that the indigenous deities, like you're saying, thousands of different small divinities that litter the landscape.
Yes.
They're going to come out of the woodwork now and embrace the new Lord, which is Aeneas.
Right. So that whole concept of a grove or a stream or a forest having a numen, right? This kind of this inherent divinity about it, with something very Roman.
Yes, I'm having a dim memory here. Of back to an episode, What's a Motto with You? About the state mottos, part 1. I think the word numen is in the motto of Colorado, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Something else ridiculous. It's just a dim memory.
Yes, no, you're right. And I'm kind of half grasping it too, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to drive people back to listen to that.
I know someday I'm dying to do an episode that we will entitle Hello Newman.
Yeah, well, we did Hello Numa.
We did Hello Numa. We've already done it.
Yeah, we did Numa, so it's tired. But a numen is the divine presence.
Yes.
And all of the indigenous ones, right, of the Italian landscape, they're all on Aeneas' side.
Yes, right. So that's very important. Again, it's another one of these very clear symbols that Aeneas needs to kind of let him know, okay, this is where fate wants me.
Right. Yeah. And the listener might also be aware of a really interesting story. We'll have to cover this at some point, from Livy, right? So in the pre-Rome era, I mean the early Republican Rome, I guess I should say, the character of Horatius Cocles. Yeah. Right. The guy who stands on the bridge and holds back the invading Etruscans.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And at one point, what does he do? He prays to Father Tiber, right? Pater Tiberina, O Father Tiber, and then he jumps into the river.
Oh, that's right.
Fully clad in all his armor, in a hail of arrows, and swims safely to the shore, single-handedly saving the city of Rome against invasion.
Right.
So I think that well illustrates how important the Tiber River was to the whole civilization.
Yeah.
It was very meaningful then that this god appears to Aeneas and says, welcome home.
Exactly. So Tiberinus tells him, you've got to go find these Arcadians.
Right.
And so Aeneas and his men make their way down the river. Tiber kind of carries them along, almost like a Disney World ride.
Yes. The description is about how calm and placid the water is as they row.
Yeah. It's just a nice comfy journey. And they find the Acadians there, and they find them as kind of this rustic group of people that live very close to nature. They have no fancy buildings, just kind of these mud huts. And so they're
electric cars. Everything is kerosene powered.
Right. And Arcadia So the land of Arcadia is this place in kind of the central part of the Peloponnese.
This is confusing, right?
Yes.
This confused me for some time when I was a younger classicist. Reading about Arcadia here in Book 8 of the Aeneid, and I was thinking, but there's another Arcadia in Greece.
Yes.
The one that you're talking about. Can you sort that out for us?
Yeah, and we've driven through there.
Yes, we have.
When you're like with a groups of students, you rarely stop in Arcadia.
No, because you're going from west to east, from Olympia, trying to get to Nafplio.
Right.
That's typically what we've done.
Right, and it's still, to this day, Arcadia it's very mountainous. It's full of olive groves.
Largely uninhabited. Low population. Right. Now, if you go a little bit south of there, as I accidentally did once, I think it was 2014, you'll be stuck for a long time.
Where were you stuck?
Well, I was going from Olympia to Nafplio, but I decided not to take the more northerly road, which hugs the coast a little bit.
Yes.
And ends up in the direction of Corinth.
Right.
I decided let's go south a little bit through Arcadia, and it's just so mountainous, just endless winding serpentine switchbacks.
Right.
You just can't, it turned out fine, but it's not a short trip.
No, exactly.
For the very reason you're describing.
Right.
Idyllic, rugged landscape.
Right. And so it's associated with the Hermes was believed to have been born there. Mm-hmm. And, Hermes has these aspects of his godhood as a kind of a god of shepherds.
Right.
A god of liminal places.
Oh, boy.
Right.
Wasn't Pan there as well?
Pan as well. So it's very kind of God-haunted and eerie and mystical, and very natural.
Yeah, and the Temple of Apollo at Bassae is there, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Which is, I've never seen it.
The temple under the big tent.
That's right.
I stopped there once.
You've been there?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I really want to see it. It's got the first Corinthian column, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Is in that particular temple.
Yeah.
It's a wild place.
It is a wild place.
Yep.
And so,
but that's not the Arcadia that we're dealing with here in Aeneid Book 8.
No, but the fact that they are described as Arcadians, I think a lot of that, that kind of the aspect of being very close to nature, being very simple, not having, the civilization of walls and architecture, it's all connected together.
So it's kind of borrowing. By calling it Arcadia, you're kind of borrowing all of the mystique of the original one?
I think so, right. And so this reminded me of... in Vergil's Eclogues,
right.
in Eclogue 5,
yes,
he talks about Arcadia, the Greek Arcadia.
Yes.
And I just want to read a little bit of, and it's from Wikipedia.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. But the Wikipedia entry about Vergil's 5th Eclogue says, in Eclogue 5, the shepherds Menalcas and Mopsus mourn their deceased companion Daphnis by promising to praise Daphnis to the stars. Yes, to the stars, raise Daphnis. Menalcas and Mopsus praised Daphnis out of compassion, but also out of obligation. Daphnis willed that his fellow shepherds memorialize him by making him a mound and adding above the mound a song. Daphnis am I in woodland, hence known far as the stars. Not only are Daphnis' survivors concerned with solidifying and internalizing his poetic reputation, but the dead shepherd poet himself is involved in the self-promotion from beyond the grave through the ages of his will. So these shepherd poets are memorializing. They set up a tomb for their dead friend and kind of trying to find immortality for him. And what I found interesting about this is it's from that episode comes this phrase which becomes popular in the 17th century of et in Arcadia ego.
Right.
So even I am in Arcadia. And, and most people take the I referring to death.
Okay.
So like even in this idyllic perfection, death arises. And there's a number of paintings from the 17th century that kind of use it. It's kind of a callback to a Roman memento mori. It's like, even in the midst of heaven, death is still there. Got it.
Right,
so
that tag comes from Eclogue 5.
It does, right? And so I wondered if if Vergil had that in mind when he introduced these Arcadians as kind of idyllic. They're on Aeneas' side. They're kind of natural allies. The fact that they're close to nature makes them pure in some sense, but also there's kind of this whisper of there's also going to be death involved here. So I mean, in Book 8 we see this again that anxiety about the Roman project. This is a great destiny, but it's going to be bloody.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that even I, death, am in Arcadia is also Vergil's meant to be kind of whispering that to us in this episode.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Interesting. Quite plausible. But speaking of anxiety about the Roman project,
yes,
it's time for the ads.
All right.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Ratio Coffee, located in Portland, Oregon, is the brew child of the fabulous entrepreneur, Mr. Mark Helweg. He was tired of having mass-produced coffee fed to the masses.
He'd had it.
Yes.
Yes.
And so he invented two, not one, but two beautiful countertop coffee machines, the Ratio 6 and the Ratio 8.
Yes.
Jeff, can you tell me a little bit about your morning ritual that might someday make it into an epic poem?
Yes.
Of making coffee with your 8.
Right. I like to have everything set to go the night before.
The night before. You grind the beans the night before?
No, I do grind the beans in the morning because
Okay.
I want to keep that fresh.
Right.
But I have the water loaded.
Nice.
I recently got myself a metal filter.
Oh, you did?
I did.
They're great, aren't they?
They're great. It's really quite wonderful. So I have my glass, hand blown glass carafe
Borosilicate?
waiting on its little resting pad.
Right.
I got the filter waiting there. I just ground the beans, pour it into the filter, hit the button, and go.
And then you have to hang around and tend to it and watch it and baby it and things like that?
No, it's 3 simple stages, and
Wow.
it's a one press of a button.
Okay, so the first stage is?
The bloom stage.
Okay, and what happens in that stage?
Well, that's where all the off-gassing happens.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
So the hot water comes down into the cone?
Yep.
And what happens to those grinds, those grounds?
Those grounds, I mean, they soak up the, is it 200 degrees
Yes,
water
that's
coming
some hot water.
out of the Fibonacci head.
That's right.
And it comes down, drips through the filter into my glass carafe, and probably within 6 minutes,
Right.
I got a perfectly brewed pot of coffee.
Didn't you skip a couple stages?
Oh, you've got the brew stage.
Well, after the bloom
you
all
got-
the carbon dioxide floats away into the biosphere.
Right, and then you got the brew stage,
Right.
which is where the water's going through the grind.
So the little LED light moves over.
Yep.
Right.
And then the last stage is it's ready.
It's ready.
That's it.
And you remove it, and it's difficult to pour, right?
No, it's the aesthetic of the pour. It's something
Sublime?
something sublime.
Okay.
It's wonderful.
And a
Right.
delicious cup of coffee.
Every time.
Yeah, I visited some friend's house. Oh, this was maybe in November.
Oh, I don't know. I don't like where this is going.
And this delightful woman
Yeah.
who's I'm very fond of, she says to me, I would offer you coffee, but after listening to all of your advertisements, I'm more than a little embarrassed, so I'm only offering tea.
Oh, wow.
She thought that I was some kind of a coffee snob. Now, she was right.
Yes.
And she was worried that her coffee game was going to be off, so we had a delicious cup of tea.
Oh, gotcha. So, but she didn't want to haul out the Bracken Blecker.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or the Senior coffee or
Yeah.
something like that
Yeah.
with squirty plastic arms.
Right. Yeah. It probably would. The machine probably would have cowered in and of itself if it had seen
When
you
it
coming.
saw me,
Yes.
one of the representatives of the Ratio 8.
They know.
They know, yeah.
Exactly.
So let's say one of our loyal listeners is looking to up their coffee game in 2023.
yeah.
What should they do, Jeff?
Well, they should go to ratiocoffee.com. That's RATIO coffee.com. Pick out the machine that you want, the 6 or its bigger brother, the 8.
They're kind of hideous, aren't they?
They're beautiful machines.
Okay.
Yeah, they're works of art. Type in this coupon code ANCOK5, and that will get you 15% off your entire order.
Yeah, what does the K stand for?
The K stands for
Kodiak?
Kodiak? Is
Yeah,
that-
it's like the biggest bear of a
Oh,
coffee
yeah,
machine.
yeah. There you go. Exactly. Yeah.
K5.
K5.
ANCOK5. What does that get them?
That gets you 15% off your entire order. Yeah.
Now, finally, just one last question.
Yes.
What if someone says, look, I love the podcast
Yeah.
and I'd like to support it and I love coffee, but this machine, I can't pick it up at Tarmart or Walgett for $25.
Right.
It's not that attainable. What would you tell them?
Well, I tell them a couple of things. I'd say this is an investment in your coffee. This is going to be around for a very, very long time.
Decades.
Right? And frankly, friends don't let friends drink brackish tang.
That's a brilliant statement. Someone should put that on a mug.
Would be perfect.
What
for
was
a
that
mug.
again?
That would be friends don't let friends drink brackish tang.
I love it. Check it out.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by Hackett Publishing. Dave, it's the beginning of a new semester for me.
Yes.
At my college.
Yes, your Ivy Walled institution.
Yes, and I always like to get a couple of Hackett published texts into my classrooms.
Excellent.
Yep. And this year's no different. I got the Lombardo Iliad and Lombardo Odyssey.
You teaching those two texts this spring?
I am teaching both those texts.
Wow,
yep.
those are some lucky students in that class.
Yeah, that's right. Now,
because of the discount.
Of course, the discount, but also just the high quality translations. These guys have been around
Right.
for over 50 years.
It's 51 now.
51.
The golden anniversary year is over, folks.
That's right. But They've still got their headquarters in Indianapolis and Cambridge, Massachusetts.
That's correct.
And these guys have been consistently putting out just great, high quality, affordable translations and works in every other corner of academia for a long time.
Yeah, not just classics. They have Asian studies. They have South American studies. They've got psychology. They got philosophy, political science. Very broad.
Very, very broad, right? And as we've often talked about, they'll often have 2 or more translators of the same work, so you can even get a variety in kind of the approach to
Right.
the ancient work that you're interested in.
Yeah. So someday we have to do an episode that's devoted entirely
Yep.
to your dissertation, which is Apuleius.
Yes.
And the Metamorphoses.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe do something on one of my special authors in grad school, which was Plato. We haven't really talked about Plato much at all.
Yeah.
I wonder if Hackett has resources on Apuleius and Plato.
I believe they have.
Of course.
Of course they do.
Right.
So, listeners, go to hackettpublishing.com, HACKETT publishing.com. Scroll through their incredible catalog. Find the books that you want. Type in this coupon code, AN2023, because it's the new year. And Dave, what will that get them?
It will get them 20% off their entire order.
And
Well, that's a fifth, if I'm not mistaken.
that is, yes.
Yeah. And free shipping.
Free shipping.
You don't want to miss that. Check it out. All right, Jeff, so as we get back into it, the Arcadians, they're having some kind of a festival for Hercules,
That's right. Yep.
They're in their rustic setting when Aeneas and his crew on a couple of fleet galleys row into town and dock along the harbor there.
Right. Again, echoes of Homer all over the place. If you remember when Telemachus shows up at Nestor's place,
That's right.
They're in the middle of a festival of Poseidon.
Yeah, it sounds like a really wonderful place, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that there's always some kind of a festival going on.
Right.
If I stop by your house there in the Heritage Hill area,
Yeah.
will there be a festival going on?
All the time. Block parties, you name it, right?
I just roll up and the Winkles are having another party. Like,
Yeah, and if you looked at that, like that Augustan, calendar of festivals,
Right.
if you celebrated every one, you'd never spend a day at work at
No,
all, right? It was
right.
just party all the time.
That's right. It's that 4:00 cake fix.
Right. So here we have this very kind of rustic, warm, wonderful celebration happening. Evander's son Pallas.
Yes.
He's a little nervous.
He's the first to spot them.
Yes, and he steps forward and basically says, "Hey, what's going on? Who are you guys?"
Now, we don't know really much of anything about Pallas at this point, except that he's associated with Athena.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
the name?
The name kind of gives that away. Right?
And he's going to be really important to the plot later on.
Yes,
I
right.
don't want to give that away. That's a major spoiler alert.
Yeah,
there.
hang on to this
A major
guy.
spoiler.
Right.
Pallas is really significant to the plot.
Yes, right. So Aeneas, he literally holds up an olive branch
Yep.
and says, "Hey, we're Dardanians," and immediately for Pallas, "Oh, that's enough." He says, "Oh yeah, come on in. Let me take you to meet my dad. Come join the festival." And so they meet Evander.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of, again, they do, it's very Homeric. They kind of share backstories. And Aeneas immediately says, "Listen, we've got common heritage
Right.
together, right? We know through Dardanus."
Yes.
Yep.
Stretching back now, it's Floyd Mayweather, right? The
boxer?
Who is the Grand Rapids native?
Yes.
Not Evander Holyfield.
No.
Okay.
See, another boxer, but not Jerri-can.
Okay.
Right.
Right. So
he's the guy who got his ear bitten off by Tyson.
That's right. Yeah. I saw a great interview with Tyson and Holyfield, 20 years after the event.
Oh, have they
Yeah, it's
buried
really,
the hatchet?
you should watch it sometime. It's really, really funny.
Oh, okay.
Tyson says, "Look, I said I'm sorry. I said I'm sorry." He just kept saying that. I apologized to him. And I think it was Larry King. He's trying to get him to fight on set, basically.
Trying to rile him up a little bit, right?
Because that's how you make a good interview.
Yeah.
And Holyfield says, "Yeah, he apologized." And
Yeah.
Tyson just keeps saying, "I said I'm sorry." So what a great name for a boxer. Evander.
Right.
Right? Named after this guy, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, strong, goodly man.
Yeah, and I've noticed in African American culture, there's a deep love and reverence for these ancient names.
Yes.
Evander, Aeneas is very common. I've met my share of Achilles.
Right.
And so I just find that just really, really interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So they share they realize, okay, we've got blood ties going back to Atlas, the Titan.
Yep.
And again, that reminder of family ties. That's uber-ollies, right? I mean, that's more important than kind of local, rivalries. If you've got blood ties, if you have guest friendship ties, well, that just kind of rolls off the red carpet.
Well, here in West Michigan, your folk have this kind of tradition, don't they?
We do?
Yeah, the Dutch bingo.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you play the Dutch bingo?
It's something that I find tiresome.
That's odd because you like it in mythology. But it's tiresome when it's too close.
I can't explain it.
Can you explain to those who are listening what Dutch bingo is?
What Dutch bingo is like if you meet somebody that has like a particular last name and that immediately reminds them,
Van Anderwalden.
Van Anderwalden, are you related to? And then you bounce around and eventually you'll find like, that's the second cousin of so.
They used to go to school together and actually they got married, and so we're really, eighth cousins, fourth time removed.
Right, exactly. I think where my distaste comes from is that my wife's family isn't a part of that at all, and she hates it.
Really?
Oh, she can't stand it. Right? It's so so.
Does
in the know, clubby, cliquey.
Does Mrs. Winkle have no anthropological interests?
She's not. No, not really.
She doesn't want to stand back and observe the peculiarities of other cultures.
I think she has a broad interest in that, but she finds that when it happens, like when we're out or we meet somebody,
right?
It's just an eye roll for her because she's immediately excluded from it, right? And so she just finds it irritating. It's you're not in the club,
right? Well, I'm not Dutch at all, and neither is my wife.
Yeah.
And when I hear people around here playing this game, I think it's really interesting.
I think it'd be different if maybe Mrs. Noe was a Dutchie.
Right? Yeah, probably. Right. I mean, it's no Racco. Let's be honest. It's not that much fun,
right?
But it's who's related to whom.
Right.
That's my point. Is this is what they're doing?
They're doing Dutch bingo.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly right.
So we can relate.
Okay. Yeah. So Evander even reveals that, hey, way back when, Aeneas, I met your dad, and he gave me some cool gifts. I got a quiver out of him and a gold cloak and
some spurs.
And some spurs, still got him.
Right.
Yep.
And Anchises, I was so excited to meet him, says Evander.
It was like kind of like
famous.
It was like hero worship.
Right. Head and shoulders, right? He signed my arm.
Exactly. Right. So the feast begins, and Evander reveals very dramatically that they are sitting on the site. You see these, he said, you see these collapsed boulders over here? This was once the cave of the dread Cacus.
Wouldn't that kind of make you lose your appetite? I mean, you're halfway through the dessert Twinkie at the picnic, and that's where Cacus used to use the restroom. Wouldn't that just
that would kind of like
sour the experience?
Exactly. You set the Twinkie down and think, okay, where's this going?
Just walk away.
Right, but he gestures towards the cave and he breaks into the story. I think this would be a good time for a little bit more Latin.
Yeah, they're I would love to, but they're fascinated by it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't lead them to, walk away or be repulsed.
No.
But they think, so this is where Cacus, the famous monster, was slaughtered.
Right. And so
and that's fascinating.
It's fascinating. They would have known this story. It's part of kind of the oral heritage, right? And so now they're kind of living the story.
Is it like visiting a battlefield? Have you been you've been to Gettysburg?
I have.
Right.
Yep.
And I've been to Gettysburg. What is it? Manassas, or what is? I'm not sure what the Confederates call it, but
the Confederates call Gettysburg?
No, Manassas in Virginia. There's different names for some of the battle. I don't mean the Confederates. I mean the Southerners.
Yeah.
Oops. They have different names for some of these battlefields.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Is this like visiting a battlefield?
I think so. I mean, I love that kind of stuff. Or it's even, to me, it's like, I think a better corollary would be visiting a place where your favorite movie was shot. Like, you can kind of relive the narrative. But I think the battlefield, you can kind of see where the whole thing went down.
Do you think I just alienated a large portion of our Southern audience?
By calling them Confederates?
I didn't really call them Confederates.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
You're fine, yeah.
Do you remember when we were in Perugia?
I do.
And it was cold and dreary. And we walked by this abandoned ramshackle spot, and you said that's the place where the Amanda Knox.
The Amanda Knox kind of murder thing happened, yeah.
Correct. So is that like Cacus?
I think so. It's got kind of an eerie quality. It's a bit salacious.
Right.
A bit. So, who wouldn't get sucked in by that? It's like, you flip on, ID and, a true crime show.
Right.
So it's got that quality to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to read it in that tone of voice? Like, what is it, Keith Morrison?
Oh, would you
No. Line 193. Here we go. Hic spelunca fuit vasto sumota erdrecasu, sem momenis kaki facies quam dir tenebat, solis in ac sam erdrari isem perque recenti, Caeda tepe batumus forabus quad fixa superbis, ordra virdrum tristipendebant pallida tabo, huic monstro volcanus erat pater ilias atros, ordra vomains ignis magna se mole forebat.
Very nice.
Thank you.
We've talked a lot about stuff that we don't like and that we get sick of in this
Right.
episode. I never get sick of that.
Oh,
I love
thanks.
I love your readings.
Oh, I love the line 199 here. It's got a ad nauseum reference, right? Vomains.
Vomains,
He's
right.
belching forth from his mouth. He's belching forth fire.
Right. So I thought it'd be worth reading the scene more or less in full
Okay.
in Lombardo's translation. Maybe let's go
Back and forth a little
back
bit?
and forth.
Yeah,
bullet
how about
point.
you start?
All right.
So we're going to wear costumes also?
Oh, that'd be nice.
Okay.
I wasn't planning ahead. Evander says, there once was a cave here, its depths never fathomed by sunlight, the lair of a half-human monster, an ogre named Cacus. The ground there always smoked with fresh blood, and nailed to the door hung human heads moldering in decay.
Oh, that's awful.
This is awful. It's foul. The monster's father was Vulcan. It was his black fires Cacus belched as he moved his hulking form. Time at last answered our prayers in the person of a god, the mightiest avenger.
There's the line.
There he is, Hercules, glorifying in the slaughter of Geryon and driving that triform ghoul's huge bulls in triumph, filling the Tiber's valley with cattle. Cacus, whose fiendish mind could leave no crime undared or trick untried, rustled 4 superb bulls from the corral and as many equally outstanding heifers.
He dragged these cattle by their tails to his cave, so no one could track them back to him. That's a clever trick, right? Yeah. Tracks are moving backward into the cave?
Right.
Okay. Then he hid the animals in the rocky gloom. No one searching could find any telltale marks leading to that cave. Amphitrion's son, that's Hercules, meanwhile, was moving the well-fed herds out of their pens, rounding them up for the trail. The cattle lowed as they headed out, and the woods and hills were filled with their bellowing until the echoes began to die away. And then one heifer lowed in response from the depths of the cave, undoing Cacus.
So Hercules, he's ready to go.
Right.
But
he hasn't noticed
Right.
the bulls are gone.
Right. Exactly. And so he's ready. He's going. And I guess what's behind this is that if Hercules doesn't bring all the cattle, he doesn't get credit for the labor.
Well, I think it's possibly that. I think he also just doesn't like his property taken.
That's right.
I think that's the main thing.
Okay.
Even property, we're going to talk about this in a minute, even property that he himself has stolen is not to be taken by someone else.
Yeah, right. I got you. Right. I'm just trying to imagine driving all of these cattle from Spain to Greece. What a pain.
Yeah. Have you driven cattle on shorter distances?
No, I've seen movies about it, though.
Okay.
Right. So it looks like
This is Hercules.
tremendous pain, right?
This
And
is
whenever you
Hercules.
see it in westerns, you got at least like 12 cowboys on horses.
You got horses.
Right.
Hercules doesn't need a horse.
No, he's doing it all on his own, right? Because Hercules can do these things
Okay.
because he's the mightiest avenger.
Right.
All right, carrying on. The wrath of Hercules flared with black bile. He seized his weapons, his heavy knotted club, and ran straight up the slope like the mountain wind. It was then we first saw Cacus afraid, eyes shifting with terror. He flew to his cave faster than the east wind. Fear lent wings to his feet. He shut himself in and broke the chains that held the giant rock suspended in iron by his father's craft.
So can you explain, Jeff, what is that?
What is
That part, he broke the chains that held the giant rock suspended in iron by his father's craft. Is this some kind of a trap door?
Or it's some kind of like the chains are holding the rock in front of the entrance.
And when you break the chains,
it blocks it.
the rock falls down, and now Hercules can't get in.
Right.
Okay.
Right. The rock dropped down, blocking the entrance at just the moment when Hercules arrived. Raging mad, he scanned every approach, looking around and gnashing his teeth. 3 times he traversed the Aventine Mount. 3 times he tried the rock-solid entrance. 3 times he sank down in the valley, exhausted.
And the Aventine, that's one of Rome's 7 hills.
It is. Yep. It's one of the slopes that overlooks where the Circus Maximus was.
We've been there, haven't we?
We have.
Up on top is the Palace of Livia, right?
Right.
And right next to her palace is that of Augustus.
Yes. Yep.
Cacus was caught in the unexpected daylight. I like that, right? He pulls off the top of the mountain, Hercules does, right?
Yes.
Penned in by rock walls, Cacus howled eerily as Hercules rained down upon him everything he could throw. Weapons, branches, empty milk jugs. No, I just made that up. Colossal millstones.
Man.
Cornered, Cacus did the only thing he could, belching out clouds of smoke, an amazing display. That's got to be Mirabile Visu.
Yeah.
Is that really, I'm interrupting the flow here, but
Yeah.
is that really an effective defense?
Just belching out clouds of smoke.
Right. So Hercules is dropping everything in the kitchen sink on you from high above, and the top of the mountain, its cone has been broken off.
Right.
While he's raining down blows upon your back,
Yeah.
what do? You belch out smoke?
I don't think Cacus, he didn't think this through, or he had no idea whose cattle he was stealing.
That's correct.
Right.
They just looked like 4 bulls. I'll take them.
I'll take 'em.
No. That enshrouded his subterranean home in blinding smog shot through with dark flames. Undeterred, Hercules hurled himself into the inferno where the huge cave was choked with roiling smoke. He found Cacus there spewing forth his fiery vapors in vain. Hercules gripped him in a knotted hold and squeezed until Cacus's eyes bulged out and his throat was drained of blood. Then, with hardly a pause, he tore off the doors and the den was laid bare. The stolen oxen, a theft Cacus had denied, were exposed to the sky and the gruesome carcass was dragged out by the feet.
All right. And so
That's the end of that guy.
that's the end of that guy. And the Arcadians tell this story as like, he was our rescuer. Right? And now that Cacus is gone, we can breathe, we can live.
Well, there were those moldering human heads on pikes outside his door. That's got to be pretty frightening.
Terrifying, right?
Yeah, and the name Cacus, right, is just the Greek kakos,
Right.
meaning bad guy.
Bad guy.
Evil. He's evil incarnate is the idea.
Right. Now, one of the critiques of this passage, or the head scratchers about this passage, where Evander says, "It was then we first saw Cacus afraid, eyes shifting with terror." How do we read that? Like, Evander was an eyewitness to this?
That is such a petty criticism.
Okay, and so Evander's claiming to be living at the same time as
No,
Hercules?
it's like when you say, they say, right?
Yeah.
They say, you don't have anyone particular in mind.
Like, who's they?
Right.
Right.
That's such a petty rejoinder. What you're really saying is, it is conventional wisdom that.
Yeah.
So what Evander obviously means is, that is the first time that anyone saw a Cacus, etc. And it's based on the later description of seeing the dead corpse. Is that really a criticism?
In Secchi's article, further on the article, he talks about this maybe would have been something that Vergil, had he gone back, he would have smoothed it out.
No, I don't think so.
No, yeah.
That seems so absurd. I didn't know it was Secchi when I called it petty. I don't want to do that, but
Yeah.
how does it strike you?
I don't think it's a very strong argument. It's when I read his article and I saw this and I thought,
It's poetry.
that's right. We still will tell stories like that.
Do you know the song by Mr. Kyrie Eleison?
Of course.
Right. So there's a line in there, somewhere between the soul and
Soft machine.
soft machine.
Yeah.
The soft machine is the body, right? Isn't that what that means in that line? Somewhere between the soul and soft machine?
I thought it was referring to like computers,
You're kidding, aren't you?
software.
No, you're making a joke.
I'm not making a joke.
You really think that's what it meant?
I've not thought a lot about this song.
Okay, I didn't give you much warning.
It's got a good tune.
It does.
Maybe you could dance to it.
I love the vocal intro, but my point is, it's poetry. It doesn't have to stand up to rigorous philosophical analysis.
Right.
It's supposed to be evocative and suggestive,
Right.
Like this.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that by Evander uses the first person plural there. It often reminds me too when people are recounting watching a sporting event, and they say, and then we scored.
Exactly.
Right? You didn't score; the team did.
Right.
But you identify so much with
Of
the team. Right?
course.
So I think that's what he's doing here.
Obviously,
Right. Okay.
He is, after all, Hercules' descendant, so he's got some stake in this.
Right, exactly. Now, I think there are way more interesting questions to examine here. It's like, as we said earlier in the episode, we have this long digression. It's got to mean something.
Okay.
Okay. So what is the purpose of this story here? What is the purpose of this story told? So that it's going into Aeneas's ears. What's the lesson? If we're playing like the game in the Odyssey with like the Aphrodite and Ares story.
Right.
It's for Odysseus kind of watch out, has your wife been faithful? Hephaestus kind of stands in for Odysseus. He's clever in a certain kind of way. So if we play that game, who is Aeneas in this story?
Right.
How do we read it? I find that stuff very, very interesting.
Okay, before we go to that,
Yes.
can we have a little bit of a travelogue, a little bit of a digression?
Let's do this. Yes.
My favorite city, probably my favorite city in Italy, like many people, is Florence.
Yes.
And how many times have you been to Florence? You probably lost count. But
Many, many times.
yes.
Yeah.
So right outside the Academia, right, where the statue of Michelangelo's David is now housed. It used to be in the piazza itself, is a very gorgeous sculpture group by Baccio Bandinelli.
Yeah.
So it'd be Hercules and Cacus.
Yes. And Cacus is he's like down on his knees.
He's crouching.
And Hercules has him like by the hair.
Yes, with his left hand grasping his hair, and in his right hand is the knurled club,
Right.
with which he's going to beat him senseless
Yes.
and eventually dispatch him.
Yes.
So this was sculpted sometime between 1525 and 1534.
Height of the Renaissance.
Right, and
Yeah.
it was intended to stand next to Michelangelo's David in the same style. And Hercules, his brow is furrowed. He's gazing off into the distance. It looks like the dispatching of Cacus is completely an afterthought. He's putting no effort into this particular side job.
It's very different than the episode we just read.
That's true.
Yeah.
He put a lot of effort into that.
Yes. Well, the one thing I would like to add to that statue is maybe a little tube that would kind of send some smoke out of Cacus's mouth.
That would be nice. So that's the kind of thing they would do in Vegas,
That'd
right?
be very Vegas.
But not in the Renaissance.
No. You're right. Exactly.
So to your interpretive question,
Yeah.
what does Aeneas make of this tale, this digression? Where does he find himself in the story? Is he supposed to learn something from it?
Right. Or what are the larger themes presented here? Is it, a classic tale of civilization over savagery?
He's the cult hero,
Right.
right? He's got to tame the wild in order to make it habitable.
Right. And, and Hercules' labors in art were often used for that purpose, like on the temple of Zeus at Olympia.
Yes.
You have the labors, and it's civilization over savagery.
Absolutely.
Right?
Same as Theseus on the Hephaestion in the Agora.
Exactly. Or the lapis and the centaurs.
Correct.
Right. So is it that?
For sure it's that.
Yes.
But is it only that?
Is it only that? Right. So, in this passage, if it is civilization over savagery, Hercules himself is pretty savage.
That's okay.
Yes.
That doesn't bother me.
Okay.
He's killing a monster.
Right. Okay. It's just is he the best exemplar?
Winkle, you're so modern. How many times do I'm just kidding, but
Yeah.
This must come up in the classroom with you. It used to come up with in the classroom for me in classical mythology. The students would say, Hercules is the hero. He's behaving so brutally.
Right.
And I would say, but he's killing a monster.
Yeah.
So what's the problem?
Okay.
Right. Criminals desert like Cacus, who's not even human. He's subhuman, right?
Yes.
They're supposed to get punished.
Okay.
They didn't like that.
Right. Yeah. I see you, and I feel for my students when they bring that stuff up too. But
What do you say?
Your point is taken.
How do you respond?
Well, I mean, I will often kind of say along the lines of what you just said. It's like you're interpreting this through your own modernist lens, right? You expect these heroes to behave the way you expect heroes to behave, right?
And you're probably bothered that Hercules didn't recycle.
Yeah, exactly.
To use your line.
That's right.
He had a Red Bull before he dispatched Cacus, and he just threw it on the Arcadian landscape.
Right. All I'm saying is that if that is supposed to be the main punch of this story of the triumph of civilization over savagery, I don't think it works great along those lines. Right? I think it's more of we're in the site of future Rome. Still on the Palatine Hill there are the steps of Cacus, right? So the Romans would have known these monuments, these places where the story is associated. So it's a little bit of fan service to contemporary Rome.
Well, the Aventine is there too, as we just mentioned,
and it's an ideology of kind of where this stuff came from. I think that's a big part of this, right? But I found this interesting article from another scholar, Leo Trotz-Leiboff. He wrote an article called the Advantage of the Stronger Hercules and Cacus in Vergil's Aeneid. And I thought this was some interesting food for thought. So let me just read this. So he says, the Hercules and Cacus episode in Book 8 highlights the problematic nature of Aeneas' exploits throughout the Aeneid. Through the violence of Hercules, Vergil makes the reader question whether a story like the founding of Rome and its eventual imperial expansion can be as cut and dry as the story of a rugged hero slaughtering someone whose name literally means evil one might superficially seem. Calling into question Aeneas' morality and his justification for settling in Italy in turn casts doubt on Augustus' own means of attaining power. The Hercules and Cacus episode is fundamental to our understanding of the Aeneid as a whole, inasmuch as it brings up the question of right. The question of the rightful owner of Gerion's cattle finds its parallel in Aeneas' and Turnus' dispute over the betrothal to Lavinia, as well as in Augustus' contested claim to rule Rome. The Italy of Hercules' day, in which violence determines right, must be compared with the universal empire Augustus will eventually establish. This paper explores to what extent The Hercules and Cacus episode can influence our understanding of Aeneas and Augustus and how Vergil might be reacting to the political climate of his day through his poetry. You're shaking your head.
I don't buy this at all.
Really? Why not?
Because it's an attempt to make Vergil in what, I don't know when this article was written, late 20th century, early 21st century individual very different than he was. We have no evidence that Vergil dissented from the Augustan regime. None.
Right.
We'll talk about this more at the end of the epic, as promised, the episodes. We have no hard evidence that he had any critical word for Augustus. In fact, he has praise of him on numerous occasions. And so are we to believe that Vergil really, he's no lover of war, he's no warmonger.
Right.
But it's after 3 generations, 70 years almost of civil war, that all this comes to an end, and the Augustan peace was peace.
Yeah.
Right? It did bring an end to internecine strife. So I just don't find this plausible at all.
Okay.
This problematizing and politicizing.
All right. I wouldn't go as far as you just went. I think that would never argue that Vergil kind of abandoned the Augustan project. But I think the Aeneid is full of kind of reminders of an honesty about what it took to get there. Okay. The bloodiness of it all.
Right.
And so reading kind of Hercules, like to tame Cacus, yes, the monster's been defeated. It's made the place safe for civilization. But look what it took to do that. Hercules as an exemplar of kind of the blood that had to be shed to civilize this place. I don't find that implausible as kind of a reflection of what it took for Augustus to establish that peace.
Yes, except there's more than a little bit of equivocation. The killing of Cacus is not like the Roman subjugation of, all of the various indigenous peoples that inhabit the Italian peninsula.
Well, couldn't Cacus stand in for all of those?
I don't think so, because he's a mythological monster.
Mm-hmm.
Those individuals were seen as inferior to Rome only because they were defeated, not because they were subhuman. I think that's an important difference. And they were assumed into Roman citizenship, so that within not too long from the time of Vergil, you even have emperors who are coming from places like Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think Cacus doesn't really fit as a substitute for the subjugated indigenous peoples.
So what does it mean?
Now, Turnus does.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
Turnus maybe, because he's a Rutulian, and he's noble, but Cacus is a subhuman beast. No good hero would hesitate to kill him.
Okay. All right.
Maybe you're not persuaded. But
I'm just puzzled by the episode, right? To me, it's to just say, oh, it's a Lapiths and Centaur story. Let's move on. That doesn't satisfy me.
I agree with that.
There's got to be more to it than that.
Okay, so can I read some Brooks Otis?
Please.
Vergil, a study in civilized poetry. Brooks Otis. This is page 330. Here's a little different perspective.
Okay.
The meaning of this remarkable book, meaning Book 8, has often been misunderstood because its basic unity of design has not been clearly seen. It has one major theme. Aeneas is the divine man, the theos aner, of Roman destiny, whose mission is to defeat impious furor, the furor represented by Alecto and the Latin War. He stands in a present that is framed by a past and a future. The Arcadian Rome, whose theos aner, divine man, was Hercules, and the future Rome, whose theos aner, is to be Augustus. All three symbolize the eternally Roman struggle of pietas and humanitas against savage and barbaric violence, against the force represented by Cacus, Mezentius, and Antony. So Cacus and Hercules, I'm not saying this for your benefit, but just for everybody's. Cacus in Hercules' time, Mezentius in Aeneas' time, and Mark Antony in Augustus' time. Aeneas, in witnessing and celebrating the anniversary sacrifices to Hercules, in himself accepting the leadership in the struggle against Mezentius and the Latins, in bearing away the shield whose central panel depicts the Battle of Actium, finally realizes in very deed the role that was paradigmatically pointed out to him in the 6th book.
Okay, I like that a lot.
Well, I do too, but in fairness to your point, I think this is in some ways just a more exalted way of expressing the notion of a cult hero, of civilization over savagery.
Yes, right. But I like the way Otis he drew all those parallels. Right?
Yes.
You have the connection between kind of the Greek myth, the story we're talking about right now, and Augustus,
Right.
and finding parallels. I find that very persuasive.
Well, I do too. And the one other element I find about it that's very persuasive is that the Romans viewed themselves, no matter what others think, viewed themselves as advancing pietas, care for the gods and care for one's family, and humanitas, civilization, against savage and barbaric violence.
Right.
Now, we at our remove might say, well, they were imperialists and fascists, maybe in some sense.
Yeah.
But in some ways, although that may be in absolute sense true, it's irrelevant to Vergil and how he saw things.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Fair point. Yeah. Good point.
Okay.
Well, we heard the reference to the shield in there, but that's something we're going to have to cover.
It's going to come in the next episode.
Because I think we are up against it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it is time for us to get out of here. Mm-hmm. But before we do that, you want to say a little bit about LPSI and,
I would like to.
The Moss method?
Yeah. So we had a one-day flash sale. It was on Saturday, December 31. Ring out the old year and ring in the new, and got some students signed up. That was very nice.
Fantastic.
If you want to study Greek with me, you want to go from...
neophyte to erudite.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes.
Go to mossmethod.com and sign up for my program. It's got 40 instructional videos, 40 assignments. It's got 6 quizzes, 2 exams. I mean, that's a lot of material. I think it's an excellent value. It's self-paced, I like to call it, expert, and accessible. So I can help you learn Greek.
And if they go to mossmethod.com, they can check out some free videos.
Absolutely.
Right. And if they sign up for the course, they have direct access to you.
Yes, tomorrow at 10 a.m., we're having our weekly office hours.
Fantastic. And
you sign up for the Zoom call, and you spend an hour a week with me and other great students.
So you get to meet
Greek.
other people doing this.
It's a lot of fun.
That sounds great.
Yep. And if you want to study some Latin, go to latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. This is the program I've developed based on Hans Orberg's Lingua Latina per se illustrata, and I'll teach you to speak some Latin.
Fantastic.
So, can't miss it.
Excellent. All right. We got to thank some people, as always. Thanks to Mishka, our intrepid engineer, who puts us all together in record time.
Yes.
Every time.
Makes us sound better than we deserve.
Right. And who's making those great noises on this?
Oh, yeah. The intro and outro. That's Mr. Scott Van Zen, the fabulous guitarist. He's playing in Vegas as we speak. I don't think
Speaking of Vegas,
I don't think there's any smoke coming out of his guitar, except metaphorically.
Metaphorical smoke.
Yeah, it's a great blues music. And he and Ken Tamplin collaborated on that, and Ken gave us the bumper music for the ads. You can check out their vocal and guitar playing programs at kentamplinvocalacademy.com and Scott Van Zen's guitarschool.com.
Fantastic. Hey, if you want to shout out, and I know you want to shout out, drop us a note. You can write to Dave at adnauseam.com. Don't forget that V. Or you can write to me.
Jeff at adnauseam.com. Do not forget the V in ad navseam.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself, and we will acknowledge you.
We want to hear from you. You could pick up a t-shirt, a Quai Nocent Docent t-shirt.
Yeah.
Several different images of Hercules wrestling with a Nemean lion.
Yes, very relevant.
Yes, really beautifully done, put together by our graphic designer, lifting a rock, above his, or maybe it's holding up the world in place of Atlas.
That's right.
Check out a great ad nauseum themed t-shirt. Jeff, what are we doing next week?
We're going to hopefully get the rest of the way through Book 8 and get to Aeneas' shield, which is another fascinating scene.
Absolutely.
Yep. And Dave, you got our gustatory parting shot.
I do, and this one's a little long, and I think we want to make fun of it a little bit, if I can just be honest.
Yes.
So this is from a guy named Peter Mayle. Peter Mayle. And after reading the quote, I had to figure out, who is this guy? So Peter Mayle, according to Wikipedia, is, quote, a British businessman turned author who moved to France in the 1980s. He wrote a series of best-selling memoirs of his life there, beginning with A Year in Provence, which is 1989.
All right.
So I think that's relevant to the quote. So he says, the French don't snack. They will tear off the end of a fresh baguette, which, if it's warm, it's practically impossible to resist, and eat it as they leave the boulangerie.
What's a boulangerie?
It's just a bakery.
Oh, okay.
But you can't just say bakery.
No, you got to say boulangerie.
If you're Peter Mayle. And that's usually all you will see being consumed on the street. Here we go. Compare that with the public eating and drinking that goes on in America. Is your dander getting up here?
Keep going.
He means this as a kind of a rebuke, but as I'm reading it, I'm getting hungry.
Yeah.
Pizza, hot dogs, nachos, tacos, heroes, potato chips, sandwiches, jerry cans of coffee. half-gallon buckets of Coke. Diet, of course.
All right.
I got to interrupt Peter here. I'm thinking, who is this guy who's just dragging us through the dirt like we're savages, like we're the culinary Caucasus?
I would expect this if he was actually French.
Actually French. But then I look it up and guess what? He's a Brit that lived in France.
Yeah.
He continues, buckets of Coke, diet, of course, and heaven knows what else being demolished on the hoof. On the hoof? That's so dehumanizing.
Exactly.
Often on the way to the aerobic class.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, we're such knuckle draggers, aren't we?
My gosh, right.
Yeah.
So
after I read that, I thought, I want to eat a number of those things.
Yeah,
and then go to the gym.
tomorrow morning, I'm having a jerri-can of coffee. Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.